Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the first leg of the 2025 FedEx Cup playoffs, the FedEx-StJude Championship, and we're going to do it in 30 minutes or less. That is the goal here with all of our golf content, is to kind of take all the information that's out there about the golf course, the stats, the players, just all that stuff, and condense it down into 30 minutes, everything you need to know in an efficient manner, so that way you guys can pick some winners in DFS betting and one and done. Now, I know that I'm a little bit behind in recording and uploading this week. To kind of let you guys in on a little bit in my personal life, my daughter's kind of been very sick. She's been in the hospital. And so it's been kind of a hectic last few days because she got admitted on Friday. But, she's doing better. She's not got anything that's life-threatening, anything that's life-altering, anything that's chronic. And for that, we are super, super thankful. She's just been really sick. And she should be coming home either today or tomorrow, which is like the best news a parent can ask for, right? And so during this time, me and my wife have been kind of playing man-to-man coverage, where my wife's been at the hospital with our daughter, and I've been at home with our 3-month-old son, which is a job in its own right, taking care of a 3-month-old. But I have had a ton of help from my parents. My mom pretty much showed this kid how to drink with a bottle because he hadn't before. We've just kind of gotten the job done, right? And, by any means necessary, get the job done. So I think it's actually really interesting timing with this tournament being the FedEx-StJude Championship. Like, St. Jude is an organization that looks after children's cancer, children's medical issues, all that stuff. And, it really kind of hits home this week that that's what this is, because, while my daughter doesn't have cancer or a chronic illness or anything like that, we're very thankful she doesn't. There's parents out there that aren't that fortunate and have to deal with that. And it's absolutely terrifying. And so this week, I think it would be really cool if you win anything in DFS or betting to, donate to St. Jude or something like that, if you feel compelled to. It's a really good organization that really helps parents and children out there in need. And like I said, that's an absolute terrifying situation for a parent. I really, not that we went through it, but I just, that thought going through your mind and thinking about it, I really, really sympathize with the people who are. And I do think that this is one of the cooler title sponsors of the PGA Tour. So anyway, with all that being said, let's go ahead now and dive into the golf course. Let's start the breakdown talking about TPC Southwind. All right, so TPC Southwind as a golf course is a fairly straightforward breakdown when you look at the course itself with a flyover. When you look at the winners here and the guys who have played well here in years past, it's a pretty simple breakdown. Now, TPC Southwind is very much in the same mold of TPC Twin Cities that we saw from a few weeks back. So everything I said about TPC Twin Cities applies to this one, except I think this one is a slightly higher quality course than TPC Twin Cities. I do think it is an actual real test of golf. Basically, TPC Southwind was designed in the dark ages of golf architecture in the 1980s, and it was very much designed to be a knockoff of TPC Sawgrass, as most of the TPC courses designed in the 1980s were. And so the main defining characteristic on this course is water, and there is a lot of water in play on this course. It's the main hazard. But whereas TPC Twin Cities kind of does it in its own Minnesota way, TPC Southwind does it in its kind of, Southern hospitality Memphis kind of way, right? So it is, different agronomy from TPC Twin Cities. This is a Southeast golf course. So like we saw at Sedgefield last week, we have got Bermuda greens, we have got Bermuda rough, and then the fairway is actually quite different. The fairway is zoysia grass. Now, I am not an agronomy expert, but what I do know is that there is one course near me that has zoysia grass fairways. And I know when I play there that when I hit the fairway, the ball is going to be sitting up nice and perched on top of the fairway. It is very easy to hit a ball off of zoysia fairways. And if I were a PGA Tour player, I would probably know for certain that I can get the contact that I want and I can generate the spin that I want because the ball sits up so nicely on those fairways. Now, that's really kind of all the character of the course, though, because the greens themselves are nothing to write home about. There's not a whole lot of slope, not a whole lot of undulation. They're very simple to putt on, very simple to read. They generally do play pretty fast. That generally the whole golf course, given that it's Memphis in August, plays pretty firm and fast. So the greens will as well, but they're not difficult to putt on because there's just not a whole lot going on. This is not Augusta National, right? And they are quite small as well. So what you do see here is between all the water off the tee, between the amount of hazard of hitting into the thick, gnarly Bermuda rough, the fact that the greens are really small, the green regulation percentage here is quite low. So really the name of the game this week is going to be fairways and greens. And if you recall the last time I said that, it was during the Open Championship, right? Fairways and greens, fairways and greens. And so if you liked a guy at the Open Championship, even though it's a totally different agronomy, totally different geographical part of the world, totally different golf course, the formula is the same, fairways and greens. And guys who are really good ball strikers tend to play well here. When you look at the last winners, Hideki Matsuyama, Lucas Glover, Will Zalatoris, Abraham Answer, Justin Thomas. When you look at that list, right, those are all guys who are really good ball strikers, particularly really good approach players, who are not known for their putting, but for 1 week and 1 week only, they were able to putt really well on these greens. And honestly, that's kind of what we're looking for this week. We're going to look for guys who can really gain strokes off the tee and on approach, and just hope and pray that they have a good putting week. I think that's going to be the formula this week. Now, like I said, because this golf course places such an emphasis on approach play, I do think it is a proper test. It can be debated whether or not that this course deserves a FedEx Cup playoff event. The FedEx Cup playoffs have kind of been gutted from about a decade ago when they played 2 events in the Northeast, the Barclays and the Northern Trust, and then the BMW Championship was in the Midwest. I kind of don't necessarily like how they gutted a lot of those nice golf courses like TPC Boston, like Liberty National, from the rotation. But I do think that this course was awarded a FedEx Cup playoff event because of the title sponsor, FedEx and St. Jude. Basically, the fact that FedEx is the sponsor, that means it's going to end up in Memphis, because when you hear Memphis, you think FedEx, right? And so this just kind of happens to be the golf course that, because it has that title sponsor, now it's a PGA Tour playoff event, but it should be a good one. We've got 70 or 69 of the best golfers on the PGA Tour, and this is a proper test. And what you're seeing now, if you're watching on YouTube, is the 11th hole here at TPC Southwind, which is much like the 17th at TPC Sawgrass, where you've got kind of an island green. If you remember 3 years ago, Will Zalatoris and Sepp Straka played a playoff on this hole where Sepp Straka found the water, Will Zalatoris found the rocks, and Zalatoris was able to take a drop and get up and down to win his first PGA Tour event. Was very high on Zalatoris that week, so was very happy when he was able to win that. But yeah, that's TPC Southwind. So when you're looking at the stats this week, when you take in all that information, the stats that we're going to be looking at this week, more so than anything else, is strokes gained on approach. Good iron players play well here. And so really, even our scoring stats that we're going to look at are going to be approach based. Like off the tee, I'm going to be factoring in good drive percentage, because good drive percentage is a stat that is basically driving accuracy plus if you didn't hit the fairway, were you able to hit the green, right? Because here at TPC Southwind, if you don't have a big miss off the tee, you're going to be sitting in the Bermuda rough, and if you can still hit the green, you're going to be okay. The name of the game here this week is fairways and greens. So if you don't hit the fairway, can you still hit the green? A scoring stat that we're going to be looking at is opportunities gained. Basically, are you giving yourself good looking birdie putts? With this being a par 70, par 4 scoring, I do think is important. Now, in terms of the course length and the course difficulty, there's nothing there we're looking at this week. This is a par 70, about 7,300 yards, which measures out kind of on the longer side, especially for a par 70. And with the par 3s being quite short here at this course, you are going to see par 4s of all lengths. There's some shorter par 4s. There's some longer par 4s. So you're going to be tested with the whole bag in terms of your irons. And the difficulty generally rates out as about average. So we're not really looking at anything that is, a difficulty stat or a length stat. But par 4 scoring, with it being a par 70, is going to be crucial. And then putting on Bermuda grass, with this being Bermuda grass greens, is something that I'm going to be looking at. In terms of our comp courses, there is kind of the triumvirate of water heavy TPC style golf courses that I think you can comp to this one. That's TPC Sawgrass, PGA National, and TPC Twin Cities. And then 2 other courses that I do like as comps are also in the Southeast. Copperhead course hosted the Valspar Championship. That is a course where the fairways are quite narrow, like here. There is quite a high missed fairway penalty, like here. And the greens are quite small, like here. So Copperhead, I do think, is a valid comp. And then Eastlake, home of the Tour Championship in about 2 weeks, is another Southeastern golf course that is a long par 70 that features Zoysia grass fairways and Bermuda grass greens. So I do think that those can be what we look at for our comp courses this week. All right, let's take a quick breather. Now that we got all that information, we're going to dive down the rabbit hole. All right, so if you guys have been with me all PGA Tour season, then you know that when I say dive down the rabbit hole, then that means I'm not actually diving down a real rabbit hole. I'm talking about the rabbit hole, which is a tool from Betts Golf that allows you to use all different kinds of filters and conditions in order to really weed out the specific skills and micro skills that you want for a specific golfer on a specific week. And it really has helped me find different guys here this year. Last week at the Wyndham, it kind of opened my eyes to a few guys. I kind of had a wide player pool last week at the Wyndham. I told you guys that I was going to the tournament. I did on Thursday. And so I wanted to have guys to root for, right? And so I really widened up the player pools. That way, when I was walking the grounds, I had guys that I could cheer on, right? Like, for instance, we followed the Akshay Bhatia, Jordan Spieth, Adam Scott group for like their entire front nine. We wanted to see a lot of the Aaron Rai, Tom Kim group, but they were so far behind Spieth and Bhatia and Scott because they played so slow that we didn't get to see a whole lot of them. And then we spent some of the way we walked back to our car, we were following like the Mark Hubbard group, which he like literally made eye contact with me. I'm sure he was wondering like, hey, like, why is this dude following me and cheering me on? Because there was not a big following for that group, but hey, it's because I had Mark Hubbard in my player pool, right? And one of the reasons why is because I found some stats in the rabbit hole that indicated that Mark Hubbard might be a pretty good play. So the rabbit hole, I think, is the best golf data site there is. And that was also my experience at the Wyndham. Anyway, here's what we're looking at for the rabbit hole. The first thing I want to look at is strokes gained off the tee on driver heavy courses, because this is going to be a course where guys are going to pound driver. Best in the field: Aldrich Potgieter, Taylor Pendrith, Kevin Yu, Scotty Scheffler, and Daniel Berger. Then I wanted to look at strokes gained off the tee on courses with a high missed fairway penalty. So not necessarily club down courses, but courses where you are going to be punished if you miss the fairway. And so that kind of places a priority on accuracy. Best in the field: Scheffler, Morikawa, Oberg, Connors, and Sung J M. Then I mentioned the good drive percentage stat earlier. I want to look at that on specifically Bermuda rough golf courses over the last 2 years. Who are the best in the field at that? Aaron Rai, Colin Morikawa, Tommy Fleetwood, Bud Cauley, and Russell Henley. Then I wanted to look at strokes gained approach just for the calendar year 2025. So big sample size on approach. This is a week where I do think I'm going to go back and factor in recent iron play a little more when I make another version of the model. But this is a week where I want overall profile of skill more so than recent form, just in general. Even though I do think that the last 3 courses we've played at all have a decent indicator of how good a guy's going to play here, but I'm not looking at overall performance. I want to look at just iron play. Iron play is the main thing we care about this week. And so the best iron players in the field in the calendar year 2025 are Scheffler, Straka, Lowry, Hovland, Morikawa. Then I want to look at strokes gained approach on courses with small greens like these have. Best in the field: Scheffler, Bhatia, Fleetwood, Hoagie, Justin Thomas. Another approach stat, like I said, I'm factoring in a lot of different iron play, y'all, is courses that have a low green and regulation percentage. So in other words, are you separating with your ability to hit greens? Scheffler, Lowry, Hovland, Morikawa, Straka. If you're tired of me saying Scheffler first, boy, do I have bad news for you, because the next stat is strokes gained approach on long golf courses. This is a good way to factor in middle to long iron play, which we're going to see this week. Best in the field: Scheffler, Lowry, Fox, Morikawa, Matsuyama. Then the key distance this week is 150 to 200 yards. Best in the field: Scheffler, Schmid, Lowry, Siwoo Kim, Hideki Matsuyama, and Kevin Yu tied for 5th. Next, I want to look at strokes gained ball striking on only water-heavy courses. Best in the field: Scheffler, Lowry, Rai, Morikawa, Straka. Then I want to look at strokes gained tee to green on Zoysia grass fairway courses. Best in the field: Scheffler, Thomas, Morikawa, Schauffele, Hovland. Now we get a stat that Scheffler doesn't show up first on, because this is Bermuda putting. Just in the last 2 years, who are the best Bermuda putters in the field? Henley, Burns, Harry Hall, Mackenzie Hughes, and Denny McCarthy. Then I want to look at strokes gained putting on easy greens, because these are quite easy greens, and I do think that that can kind of boost some bad putters. For instance, the best in the field: Wyndham Clark, Jacob Bridgman, Max Grazerman, Denny McCarthy, and Scotty Scheffler coming in number 5. All right. Next up, I want to look at strokes gained total at just southeastern golf courses. So any golf course that's in the southeast, this is what's going to pop up. Best in the field: Scheffler, Schauffele, Oberg, Henley, Morikawa. Then I wanted to look at strokes gained total in strong fields because this is a strong field. So basically, I'm giving guys a boost if they have played well in majors and signature events. Best in the field, Scheffler, Schauffele, Morikawa, Fleetwood, Henley. Strokes gained total. The last category is strokes gained total on my comp courses. Best in the field, Justin Thomas, Victor Hovland, Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Shane Lowry. Now, when you put all that into a custom model, to no one's surprise, number one in my model is Scotty Scheffler. Now, this is a week where I'm going to be honest with you guys. I might not make an outright bet this week because Scheffler is in the field. He terrifies me. There's a chance he could just boat race the entire field. He is at the absolute peak of his powers. He is playing the best golf on the planet right now. He's the best player in the field. And this is a course that really aligns well to his skill set. And I think that there's a chance that he just absolutely boat races the field. And I'm not going to place any bets against that. So if I do end up placing any kind of outright golf bets this week, it is going to be in the each way market, or it is going to be in the without Scotty Scheffler market, because there's some guys I like this week, but ain't none of them even remotely close to Scotty Scheffler because he's just absolutely killing it right now. Like, I think it's only a matter of time before we talk about him as one of the best players to ever pick up a golf club. Now, number 2 in my custom model was Collin Morikawa. Now, I'm going to be honest, I am not going to be playing Collin Morikawa in DFS. I'm not going to be betting him this week. I just think he's absolutely lost. Like, Collin Morikawa is generally one of the best iron players on the PGA Tour, and he has lost strokes with his irons in each of the last 2 events quite badly. Missed cut in both those events. Now, granted, those were both overseas, but I don't think coming back to the States is going to fix the problems that he's had all season. He just hasn't been like peak Collin Morikawa. And then, oh, by the way, Collin Morikawa's got this weird thing where, like, if there's a course that he should set up well at, like a harbor town, like a Sawgrass, he doesn't always play well there. And so I think that that's just this could be just another example of that. And so I'm not going to be playing Collin Morikawa at all in DFS and not going to be betting him in any way. Now, Xander Schauffele is third in my model. This one I like a lot because Xander is one of the best approach players in the world. He is really starting to turn around a complete game with the exception of the Travelers Championship. He has pretty much been positive to neutral in every category, in every event since the Memorial, right? And Xander is really good in the Southeast. Xander is really good in the FedEx Cup playoffs. Hey, when it comes to money, you don't mess with Xander and Cantlay, okay? And the FedEx Cup playoffs is where they make their money. So they're good in those events. And I really think that this is a good spot for Xander. If I were playing a DFS lineup that did not start with Scotty, it's probably going to start with Xander. Then we have defending champion Hideki Matsuyama, number 4. So, y'all, I got to be honest. I came on here last week and thought that the Wyndham was not a good course fit for Hideki, but I played him anyway at low ownership, and he turned in a top 20, T19. The only category he lost strokes in was off the tee, and that was barely, and that was strokes gained off the tee at the Wyndham is not going to necessarily be indicative of how they're going to play here. So I've seen enough out of Hideki that I'm going to go back to him here this week. As the defending champ, this is a spot that he should have good vibes at, and I think this is a really good spot for him. Number 5 in my model is going to be Russell Henley. Look, this is a guy that I'm going to be playing a ton in DFS this week because Russell Henley has turned in 4 straight top 10 finishes, pretty much all green across the board in all the strokes gained categories. He is really good in the Southeast. He is really good at water heavy golf courses, and he's been pretty good at this event, a T7 and a T6. So I have absolutely no complaints about playing Russell Henley this week. I think this is a really good setup for him. And I think, there's ulterior motivation this week between guys who really want to make sure that they put their stamp and end up on the Ryder Cup team. Russell Henley could pretty much end all debate on being on the Ryder Cup team if he ends up winning this event. Now, number 6 in my model is Victor Hovland. I like Hovland quite a lot this week as well. We mentioned the approach play is the name of the game this week. And while it was quite poor at the Open, he had been trending as one of the best approach players on the PGA Tour prior to that. His weakness is around the green play. Well, this is a course where it's not very difficult to get up and down because the greens aren't very difficult and the green side surrounds aren't very difficult. So I think this is a great spot for him. Tommy Fleetwood's number 7. And I got to say, I'm normally not a Tommy Fleetwood guy, but I am going to be one this week. So when it comes to Tommy Fleetwood, much like what we talked about with the other guys near the top, almost entirely green strokes gained profile, except for the U.S. Open, which we'll forgive because Oakmont was just utterly just almost impossible to play. So I really like what I'm seeing out of Fleetwood. He's a complete player. He played here last year and finished almost dead last in putting and still was able to turn in a good finish. So I do think that Fleetwood is in a really good spot here this week. Rest of the top 10 of my model, Lowry, Cantlay, and Spawn, I all think they're great course fits. And y'all, I got to say, this is a week where I am going to prioritize course fit ahead of recent form. Now, before we take a look at the whole board, I do want to mention I am going to tinker with this model all week long. If you want the final top 10 of this model, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. That will give you access every week to my article where I write my core plays for DraftKings, FanDuel, and my model top 10, as well as a full write-up. And if you want to access that, that is where you can go for that. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather. A low-cal change because my son has woken up and now my mama is watching him. So I had to go to an area of the house where he cannot make noise and get here in the background of the stream. Anyway, take a look at the whole board this week. So let's talk about DFS strategy for 1 second. So basically, whenever Scotty Scheffler's in the tournament, the bottom line is, do you play Scheffler or do you don't? And normally, there's like an actual decision to be made. You know, we think about the Open Championship where you had Rory and you had Rahm and you had Bryson and you had these options for playing different guys up top, right? And well, Scotty won the tournament. But here, looking at this week, like there's no Rory, that the live guys aren't in the field, and it's just Scotty. And you've got, the rest of the kind of tier 2 PGA Tour players beneath him. But I don't think DraftKings did a very good job of making you make a decision on whether or not you play Scotty. And what I mean by that is, I think in terms of actual win equity, in terms of actual performance, he should be priced much, much higher than he is. Either that or the other tier 2 guys, the Xanders, the JTs, the Henleys, should be priced much lower to allow you to actually have a strategy where you can play multiple of them. But basically, with where they're priced, there's like not a whole lot of detriment to playing Scotty Scheffler, because if you play Scheffler, because it's a FedEx Cup playoff or FedEx Cup playoff event field, I think I said that correctly. The 7K range and even the 6K range has a lot of guys that you can backfill your lineup with and still feel pretty good about. And with it being a no-cut event, even if you have a guy who doesn't necessarily play all that well, but he's going out and he's making birdies, he's getting streaks, he's getting the bounce back points, you can kind of win in the margins by having a Scheffler lineup with all of the rest of those value plays. So I'm going to be playing a ton of Scotty Scheffler in DFS here this week. Now, as I mentioned before, in the lineups where I'm not playing Scheffler, I like Xander, I like Henley, I like Fleetwood, I like Hovland, but I'm probably going to be fading the rest of the top of that board. If I haven't mentioned a guy yet, then I'm just not all that interested in playing them. Now, when we head down into the 8K range, I love Sam Burns this week. So Sam Burns, we've talked about before on the show, is the king of firm and fast golf courses. And this is going to be one that's going to play firm and fast. He is also statistically one of the best drivers of the golf ball on the PGA Tour, so he's not going to get in trouble off the tee. He's also statistically one of the best putters on the PGA Tour, and he hasn't been putting well in his last 2 events. It's normally the approach play with Sam Burns that we're concerned about, as you can see by his long-term profile, but he's only lost strokes on approach 1 time in the last 7 events. You play Sam Burns when he has good iron play. You play Sam Burns on firm and fast golf courses. So I'm going to be playing a ton of Sam Burns here in this week, and I really like Burns and Matsuyama there in that upper 8K range. Now, I'm a little bit cautious on Sepp Straka. He's been great this year. He's been pretty good at this golf course even, with a runner-up finish to Will Zalatoris. But problem is his iron play is cooling off. He was, really taking that step at the start of the season because of his iron play leveling up, and it's kind of leveling off. And so I'm a little bit concerned about that. I wish he were a little bit cheaper than 8,700. Not interested in Keegan at 8,600 either. I think this is a great Corey Connors golf course. I think you want to play Corey Connors. His history here is not all that great. It's not all that bad either. But you want to play Corey Connors at golf courses that emphasize accuracy off the tee and iron play. And I do think that this is a course that emphasizes those two. He's not a great around the green player. He's not a great putter. But this is not a difficult course to scramble at. And you can really start on second base with good ball striking. So I think this is a pretty good spot for Corey Connors. I am also going to be going back to Chris Gotterup at 8,000 on DraftKings. So Chris Gotterup, we've talked about before, he's now in the Ryder Cup consideration. He's got an incredible strokes gain profile over the last 2 months. He's just a really good ball striker of the ball, and he's been running hot with the putter, and I want to continue to run that hot putter. He actually has a win also at the Myrtle Beach Classic, which I think is a decent comp course to this event, but is not necessarily an event that a lot of people in this field have played. So I like Chris Goddard up a lot at $8,000. In fact, I really like this upper 7K, low 8K range when you can get Berger, McIntyre, Spawn. I think they're all great course fits there in the upper 7K range. So I think in your Scheffler lineups, it's going to be real easy to kind of pick off multiple of those guys to pair with Scotty Scheffler. Now, I love Shane Lowry at 7,400. His history here is not spectacular. Last year he was 50th, which is not great, but he does have a 6th place finish here back in 2020. I just think that in a course that emphasizes iron play, I think that's where you want to play Shane Lowry at. And he's down here at 7,400 when during the Open Championship, he was priced up at like 9K, and he made the cut. Like, he wasn't great, but he made the cut. And so, like, I just kind of think that that's a really good buy low spot for Shane Lowry here at this price tag in this field. I also really like Chris Kirk this week. So Chris Kirk at this event has a 6th and a 16th to his name. And, we kind of mentioned how this course is all about iron play. Well, his irons are running really, really hot. At the Wyndham, he was able to cash in a 5th place finish, gaining a stroke per round on approach. Same situation at the 3M Open for a T14. And then we remember his playoff loss at the Rocket Classic, where he had that just an incredible iron week that week. So I think this is a really good spot for Chris Kirk at a course that he is comfortable at. He's not the longest off the tee, but this course is not going to box you out for lack of distance. So I really do like Chris Kirk there at 7,200 also. I am also going to go back to Akshay Bhatia. So you guys know, if you've listened to this for a long time, he's one of my guys, right? Like, I was early on him. He was a core play at the Barracuda for his first win. He was an outright bet of mine for his second win at TPC San Antonio. And I think that that's not a terrible comp course to this one, kind of speaking of Corey Connors as well, who's won there twice. But basically, you got to keep it in play off the tee. You got to be good with your irons. And you're around the green play, and putting can kind of, if you're not great at it, you can kind of be okay here because it's not that difficult. At the Wyndham, I was following him around on his round, and he was absolutely striping it off the tee and with his irons. He was pretty much always playing after Jordan Spieth and Adam Scott because he was driving it better than them. He was hitting better iron shots than them, but he could not buy a putt. He lost basically 5 strokes putting over 2 rounds. And if he had those 5 strokes, if he was just neutral with the putter, like, he could have been like right there and probably made the cut and probably contended, as opposed to withdrawing because he didn't want to finish his round on Saturday morning. I think when you look at his skill set, it really does play well at this golf course. And then, oh, by the way, last year he played this event and finished 12th. It's pretty, and he gained strokes putting. So I think this is a really good spot for Akshay. I'm going to be going back to them, and I hope that a lot of people feel burned by him over the last 2 weeks, between his withdrawal at the Wyndham, between him not closing the deal at the 3M, and I hope that I'm going to be like the only one on him. I think he's a really good play for this course. Now, in the 6K range, here's the deal. This is not a bad 6K range because this is a quality field. Right now, I do think there's a little bit of drop off, but there's a few guys in this range that I'm going to want to get to. Siwoo Kim, I think, is a superb course fit, and I think nobody's going to play him because he's coming off of 3 straight missed cuts. But I think that the course fit is undeniable. I think that he's an absolutely great fit for this place. And I don't know, the results don't really bear that out, though. As best as a 16th. So maybe I have that wrong, but we'll see. I'm going to be playing him. I'm going to be going back to him. After that, Sam Stevens at 6,700. I always like it longer golf courses, of which this is one technically because it's a par 70. It's quite long for a par 70. So I'm going to be going back to him. I think my absolute favorite in this range, though, is Ryan Fox. Like, his recent iron play, even though he's coming off of 2 missed cuts, his recent iron play has still been really, really good. I also think he's a guy that you really want to play at firm and fast golf courses like this one. He has a win at Myrtle Beach at a course that, again, I think is quite similar to this one. So I do think that this is a good spot for Ryan Fox. I'm going to be back on him this week. I've just got a gut feeling about Thomas Dietrich. I don't know how to explain it other than that, but he's going to make my DFS player pool for that reason. Same thing with Matty Schmidt. I think I'm going to play Matty Schmidt also. But I think the guy that makes the most sense in this low 6K range, you talk about a guy who can randomly spike with his iron play and with his putting, it's Jacob Bridgman, who played really well in Florida this year. has been pretty good putting on Bermuda greens in general. At the Wyndham, he gained strokes in every category except the putter. But with as good as he was in Florida, with as much as this course is dependent on iron play, and then, if you're looking for a guy at the bottom, you want him to putt well. Jacob Bridgman's a guy who can absolutely do that. He's going to be in my dart throw there at the bottom of the board. All right, let's close out by talking one and done. So it has not been a great season for me for one and done, but I can really turn around with these last two events. So basically, you probably, if you're playing smart one and done, have been planning out who you're going to play at both of these events. And so in one of the one and dones that I've been playing last week, this is not the one that I've been picking here on the show. Last week, I played Ben Griffin at the Wyndham, and then I have saved Victor Hovland and Rory McIlroy for these two FedEx Cup playoff events. So even though it has not been a great run out for me here in this particular one and done, if you win or get a winner in these next two events, you can end up feeling pretty good, and you can end up kind of creeping your way into the money, right? So Victor and Rory are my picks there in that one. In the one and done that I've been picking here on the show, where I have been supremely aggressive, I don't know exactly who I have left, but let's go ahead and take a look. Let's find out together here live on the show. And I need to make up about $1 million worth of ground. So I need to find a winner here. So I still have Matt Fitzpatrick left. That's not bad. I still have Russell Henley left. I still have Ben Griffin, Sepp Straka, Victor Hovland, Aaron Rai, Corey Connors, Cameron Young. Okay. So that gives me some options, right? So what I'm thinking now is for this event to play Russell Henley, who I really like for this golf course. And then at the BMW, I can play Victor Hovland, who I think is a slightly better fit, given that Caves Valley is going to be a supremely long iron intensive golf course. Or I could go Cameron Young at the BMW. I'm going to have options. Yeah, but I'm going to go ahead and lock in Russell Henley now. I think this is a great Russell Henley golf course. All right, but that's going to do it here for the show, guys. So we have broken down DFS betting and one and done for the FedEx-StJude Championship in 30 minutes or less. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information you need in order to pick out some winners here for this tournament this week. And we will be back next week talking about the BMW Championship. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel so that way you can be with us for that. And then also college football season. It's coming up quick. We're going to have a ton of content coming your way once college football season starts, including our season preview, including some live best ball drafts, and then our DFS previews for each week as it happens. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us here for college football season. And also, if this video helped you out in any way for the FedEx-StJude, make sure you drop a like. Helps me out a ton. I really do appreciate it when you guys do that. But that's going to do it here for this episode, y'all. Best of luck to you at the FedEx-StJude Championship with your DFS lineups, your betting slips, and your one-and-done entries. Hopefully, I was able to help you guys out, give you guys some good information. Thank you guys for watching and listening at this point, and I will see you guys next time.